Dreaming of a better sleep? Tossing and turning is not your destiny. And Ollie is here to help. Ollie invites you to sink into sweet, sweet slumber to improve your mental and physical health and overall wellness. More than just melatonin, Ollie's ingredients help you unwind your mind for a delightfully dreamy drift off. Sleep is on the way at Ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Jay Johnson. And he is a speaker, trainer, and he specializes in human behavior and performance. He's talked for TEDx and so many different organizations. And it's going to be a fascinating discussion on behavioral intelligence. And happy to welcome Jay to the show. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Dr. Lou. Glad to be here. I'm also joined by my assistant, Revna, so she will hopefully be a silent partner during this.
Yeah. Animals are always welcome guests. And talk about your story and your background and how you got to do what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur. I started my very first business many, many years ago and learned a whole bunch from that experience. So my background is actually in behavioral science. I studied communication, psychology, and neuroscience, and started a handful of different businesses. The one that I currently am the CEO and founding partner of is that of Coius Creative Group. We provide marketing and communication services to businesses. And then the other side of the business is training, talent development, and coaching services to help people to behave intelligently.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story, and we'll get down to it. And one of the I think for the audience, this idea of dealing with difficult people is gonna be really interesting, and different skill sets and dealing with that. So one thing is talking about this behavioral intelligence, and so talk about what it is and how people can apply it to succeed in their business and also in their personal lives, relationships, all of that.
Yeah, so behavioral intelligence is like emotional intelligence's long lost ugly cousin that nobody invited to the party. So the term was actually first used in a military context, and it was about looking at the patterns of behaviors of potentially troop movements and different things like that that would give one side an advantage over that field. Fast forward, there was a few practitioners that had talked about behavioral intelligence, but they really only looked at it from its psychological applications. And what we did was we sort of redefined that space. And we have a very easy, simple to remember framework for what behavioral intelligence is and how it can be applied. So it has 4 quadrants. It is the ability and skills to accurately explain existing behaviors. So the behaviors that you see out in the world, where do they come from? What generates them? What stimulated one response versus a different one? Then taking that knowledge and being able to predict patterns of future behaviors. So looking at it and saying, okay, if I know that X is going to occur, say, for example, I know that John is going to interrupt me in a board meeting. Well, what does that prediction mean? How can I use that to then get to the third stage, which is influencing other people's behaviors? Maybe I give John a task. Maybe I set him, maybe I ask for, a talking stick. I can influence other people's behaviors. But to do so, I also have to manage and control my own behaviors. So I've got to be able to manage my reactions. I have to look at difficult behaviors and be able to analyze them. So behavioral intelligence is really skills that help us to navigate existing behaviors, predict the future ones, influence other people's, and then control our own.
Yeah, and then the more you describe it, it sounds very strategic and very military-esque. And so, in this context, because, especially I'm a surgeon, 30 years ago, it was okay for surgeons to like throw temper tantrums and, but now they get sent to HR. So, one thing is talking about is this dealing with difficult people. And so talk about like how to prepare yourself when you're dealing with these difficult people in either personal or career context.
Yeah, it can be really, really difficult. So interestingly enough, one of my graduate degrees is in health communications. And one of my very early clients was working with the University of Michigan Health Systems and actually training body language and behavioral mechanics that would improve patient satisfaction scores amongst physicians, surgeons, nurses, et cetera. So it's funny that we have that. I didn't know that, and funny that we have that commonality there. But when we think about difficult people, one of the biggest challenges that we always come across is that we label them difficult people. So say that I'm working, and I'm going to use John again, just because that's the name at the top of my head. Say I'm working with John, and John and I have some kind of interpersonal conflict. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I just don't like John. Now, the moment that my brain makes that determination, I'm going to label John difficult or whatever, or pick a different word, because we know we labeled them something else. But as soon as I make that label, we fall victim to the halo and horns effect. Now, I use this example, Dr. Lou. I think you'll appreciate this. If your best friend exhibits one form of a behavior, well, maybe they're passionate. But if John, that enemy, exhibits that same behavior, well, they're just being stubborn. And we have this impact in our brain of being able to quantify or make judgments and excuses for people that we put the halo around versus the person that has the horns effect. Anything that they do is going to be looked at in a way that's, oh, well, that must have been directed at me. John could bring in pizza to a Friday meeting, and I'm going to go, oh, John's just doing that to suck up. He's doing that to make me look bad because I didn't bring a pizza. And, so we have this sort of labeling effect inside of our brain that when we do put somebody or classify somebody as difficult, everything they do then becomes more difficult or feels like it's being targeted at us.
Next question is, with this idea of the core of behavioral intelligence, and for a lot of the audience out there, how does understanding behavior at a deep level empower leaders and individuals to achieve greater success in their personal and professional spheres? And can you share an example where this dramatically changed the culture or somebody's career trajectory?
Yeah, I love that question. I'll even link it back to what we were talking about, right? When we're dealing with somebody, say, that's difficult, and John does one of the behaviors that I've predicted, I know John is going to do, and I get really upset, and maybe I engage and I say something, and then immediately I get sent down to the HR office, or it goes tit for tat, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in conflict. Conflict costs organization billions of dollars every single year because of failed projects, because of work days people just take off. Like, I'm not dealing with John today. I'm taking a sick day. So we have all of these real world impacts. Behavioral intelligence helps us to think about, okay, let's take that behavior of interrupting me in a meeting. John has done this on multiple occasions. And why does John do that? Maybe John is feeling, maybe I try to explain that. John is feeling like his voice isn't being heard. Maybe he's not being acknowledged by the boss. Maybe he feels like he's in competition with me over the next promotion or something of that nature. So now I can explain where that behavior comes from. If I can predict it, I like to use this. Do you like scary movies, Dr. Lou? Imagine you're sitting down with a partner to watch a scary movie, and the whole scene's going on, and about halfway through the movie, right when it starts to get scary, whoosh, the ghost comes across the screen. And your initial reaction is, to jump into freeze like normal fear. Well, then your partner does the weirdest thing. They grab the remote and they hit the back button. And 9 seconds backwards, and it plays again, and the ghost comes across. And then they do it again. They do it again. They do it again. Eventually, at some point in time, you're going to be like, this isn't scary anymore. I'm used to this. I use that as an analogy, and we see the same behaviors over and over and over again, yet every single time we allow them to affect us like it was the first time it happened. That's a choice. That's not us having a reaction. That is literally us choosing our reaction. So what behavioral intelligence does is it allows us to take those thoughts, those feelings that we have, and then choose a more effective behavior. So instead of reacting, getting upset, throwing my papers and leaving the room, which doesn't solve it, I now maybe can address it in a functional and appropriate way. I might be able to say very calmly, John, I noticed that you're interrupting me. Is there something that's really important, or may I finish this thought? And take a different approach. Now, even if John can't manage their own behavior, the only thing I can control is myself. So I can control my the way that people perceive me. I can control my influence measures to maybe get to the bottom of what that conflict is. That's a powerful way for organizations to look at how can I make that, we say behavior is thoughts plus feelings equals behavior. How do we make that equal sign a little bit longer? How do we make it just a little bit further where we can actually choose a behavior that's going to be more effective?
Yeah. Yeah. And then moving on is, we've really discussed the importance of it and what it is and how we can, tailor it to difficult situations. So talk about one is the first steps in improving behavioral intelligence. You mentioned emotional intelligence, and what is particularly interesting to the audience is how can you leverage behavioral intelligence in your business to improve your sales and your marketing and all of that.
It's a great question. So one of the things that we developed is what's called the behavioral elements assessment. And it is built off of the science of Dr. Paul Lawrence and Dr. Nitin Noria from Harvard University, who established the 4-Drive framework. And what we use this tool for is to help people become very aware of what is actually driving their behaviors. So we have 4 drives, core biological drives, and they literally did a comprehensive study to understand how we got from our ancestors of 185,000 years ago to our modern day selves with the iPhone. And there's 4 core human drives that have really perpetuated it: the drive to acquire, the drive to defend, the drive to bond, and the drive to learn. In that 4-drive framework, we get a better understanding of what motivates us or what brings us to choosing particular behaviors over a different set of behaviors. So we encourage people to learn about what's driving their behaviors by taking the behavioral elements assessment. Once they gain that awareness, like for example, I have a very high drive to acquire and a very high drive to learn. That can make me not very focused. I will start talking about, the polar bear habits in the Antarctic before we know it, and all of a sudden be like, what were we talking about again? As an entrepreneur, it's really great because I can make decisions quickly. I can come up with innovative solutions, but I may not be as structured or organized as I need to be in order to be able to repeat results. So taking something like the behavioral elements assessment gives you an idea of yourself. We also use that to better understand what's driving people's purchasing behavior. Are they buying stuff because they want to win in service to competition? Are they doing that from the status perspective or the ego perspective? Are they buying it because they are trying to grow, develop, learn, reach self-actualization? Are they buying it to protect themselves or, security? We always think like security doors or locks, but are they making investments right now that are predictable and safe? Are they buying things for other people? Are they buying it because it's helpful for the team or the tribe and that drive to bond? So by understanding ourselves, it also gives us a better categorization of buyer personas, of messaging that's really effective. I've got some great examples that we've used in the past, but that's one of the most powerful applications is really understanding what it is that drives people to make a decision to say yes to your product or to say no to your product because it's not fulfilling one of those drives.
Yeah. No, you mentioned this interesting idea of behavioral assessments in the program, and then also talk about how people can, if they're not savvy in this, how they can start to improve their behavioral intelligence, either through coaching or through listening, or a lot of it's probably real world, learning and application. So how can they start to do that?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, right? Like you can learn something, but how do you then apply it? And the reality is it's practice. And we actually do a lot of different work, whether it's in training, whether it is in coaching. We provide some different tools let's think about it. I like to use an analogy. Imagine, everybody brushes their teeth with generally their dominant hand, whatever that hand is. So I'm right-handed. I may brush my teeth with my right hand. Well, if I wanted to start switching to brush my teeth with my left hand, it would be very awkward and uncomfortable for at least the first 2 weeks. I'd probably stab myself into gums 100 times. But over the course of that 2 weeks, what I'm actually doing is tapping into the brain's power for neuroplasticity. I'm giving myself that opportunity to create new neural pathways. And after a 2 week time frame of practice and development, I'm going to find it a little bit easier. Now, I'm not going to change my dominant hand, but I'm at least going to find that practice easier. So when we look at something like when we see our personality, we're not stuck being, that's just how I am. We can look at it now and say, that's how I want, I can choose to be or to behave in a very different way. So practice, practice, practice. But in order to practice, we also have to understand what our behaviors are. And that's a big part of what the program is being able to track and analyze, here are the behaviors I'm using. Are they producing the best outcomes or the outcomes that I want? If not, what is a small tweak? Because we don't want to make massive changes. People won't do massive changes. So what's a small tweak that we can start normalizing a new set of behaviors that would produce a different outcome? And maybe that is in a meeting, we learn to not say something, even if we really want to say something. Maybe that is, instead of feeling like we have this set of schedule in order to produce our results, we shift that ever so slightly because we may find a different pattern by making a small routine shift. So it's really focusing on practicing, analyzing, and tracking our behaviors and our behavioral progress.
Yeah, so wonderful. And I've really enjoyed this talk as I've, talked to so many people about communication today. And how can people contact you, check out your socials, follow you, reach out to you, etc.?
Yeah, pretty easy to find me on the socials. My handle is at JAY Johnson CCG. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn the most, but you can always go to the Behavioral Elements, www.behavioralelements.com, and take the assessment absolutely free. You'll get a summary report, and that'll also get you connected to us in the newsletter. So we'd love to let you explore and see what that is, gain some awareness, and hopefully that'll help you navigate future behaviors.
Out there, let's thank Jay for coming on, and be sure to give his socials a like and follow. And thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Lou. It's been my pleasure.